I thought I was hallucinating from the medications when I saw my son Brandon walk into my ICU room carrying a briefcase, followed by my daughter Jessica clutching a folder thick with legal documents. Behind them shuffled a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit who kept glancing toward the door like he wanted to bolt. Through barely opened eyelids, I watched them arrange papers on my bedside table while whispering about signatures and deadlines. Brandon leaned over my supposedly unconscious body and whispered to Jessica about dividing the oceanfront properties first. Thank God I had moved my $12 million empire offshore just 3 weeks earlier. The journey to $12 million began 35 years ago in the cramped 2-bedroom apartment I shared with my babies after Tommy died. My husband had been working construction on a high-rise downtown when scaffolding collapsed, taking him and 2 other fathers with it. The insurance settlement barely covered funeral expenses and 6 months of rent. I remember staring at my bank statement showing $53.47 while Brandon, barely 2 years old, tugged at my skirt asking for crackers we didn't have. Those early years blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and determination. I worked cleaning office buildings from midnight until dawn, racing home to feed the children breakfast before collapsing for 3 hours of sleep. Jessica would wake me by climbing onto my chest, her tiny fingers trying to pry open my eyelids because she wanted to play dolls. The babysitter cost almost as much as I earned, but I refused to apply for welfare. Tommy always said I had more backbone than sense. My cleaning business started with that $50 investment in basic supplies from the hardware store. Mrs. Patterson, who lived in the apartment upstairs, watched the children those first few months while I scrubbed bathrooms and vacuumed carpets in downtown office complexes. I undercut every competitor by 20% and worked twice as hard building a reputation for reliability that spread through word of mouth among building managers. Within 5 years, I had contracts with 43 commercial properties and employed 18 women who needed flexible schedules like I once did. We specialized in medical facilities and financial institutions that required security clearances and meticulous attention to detail. I learned every aspect of commercial real estate by asking questions and observing during those midnight hours when I had access to offices most people never saw. The transition from cleaning to property management happened gradually. When one of my clients wanted to sell his building, he offered me first chance at the contract because he trusted my work ethic. I borrowed against everything I owned and convinced the bank to finance the rest based on my existing maintenance contracts. That first property purchase taught me more about business than any college degree could have provided. Real estate development across 3 states followed naturally as I recognized undervalued properties in growing markets. Each successful project funded the next, creating a snowball effect that accelerated through the 90s and into the new millennium. I bought distressed properties, renovated them efficiently, and either rented or flipped them based on market conditions. My reputation for completing projects on time and under budget attracted investors who provided capital for larger ventures. Throughout those building years, Brandon and Jessica grew up surrounded by blueprints and business meetings. They attended private schools and summer camps, wore designer clothes, and never wanted for anything material. I thought providing them with opportunities I never had would inspire gratitude and work ethic. Instead, they developed an expectation that money would always flow freely from my efforts into their desires. Brandon's entrepreneurial ventures began in college with grandiose plans and minimal follow-through. I funded his organic food truck business that failed after 6 months when he discovered he disliked waking up before noon. Next came the artisanal furniture workshop that produced 3 tables before he lost interest. Each failure cost between $20,000 and $50,000 amounts I wrote off as educational investments in my son's future. Jessica chose a different path of expensive lifestyle maintenance funded by my success. Her wedding to a pharmaceutical sales representative cost $120,000 for a marriage that lasted 18 months. The divorce settlement required my financial assistance when her spending habits exceeded their combined income. Her second marriage to a personal trainer ended when she discovered he was also training several other wealthy women in more than fitness techniques. The pattern continued through their 30s and into their 40s. Brandon's gambling habit developed gradually, starting with office poker games and escalating to weekend trips to Atlantic City that stretched into week-long disappearances. Jessica's third marriage to a social media marketing consultant seemed promising until his company declared bankruptcy, leaving them both financially vulnerable and emotionally distant from each other and from me. Their phone calls became predictable requests for financial assistance disguised as family concern. Brandon would begin conversations asking about my health before transitioning into discussions about his latest business opportunity that needed just a small investment to guarantee massive returns. Jessica preferred dramatic presentations about unexpected expenses that threatened her lifestyle or her children's educational opportunities. I enabled their dependence without recognizing the trap I was creating. Each rescue made them more confident that I would always provide solutions to problems created by their poor choices. They never asked about my business challenges or offered assistance with anything beyond their own immediate needs. The realization that I had raised two adults who viewed me primarily as a financial resource rather than as their mother created a hollow ache that I tried to fill with increased generosity. The local newspaper article that changed everything appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. The headline read, "Self-Made Millionaires Share Success Secrets," and featured my photograph alongside 4 other businesswomen who had built significant wealth in our state. The article detailed my journey from widowed single mother to real estate mogul, estimating my net worth at $12 million and describing my property portfolio across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Within 24 hours of the article's publication, both of my children called expressing sudden concern about my well-being and desire to visit more frequently. Brandon suggested we have dinner together every week so he could monitor my health. Jessica proposed monthly shopping trips and spa days to ensure I was taking proper care of myself. Their newfound attentiveness felt simultaneously touching and suspicious, like affection with an agenda attached. Brandon arrived at my house the following Saturday carrying a bouquet of roses and wearing an expression of exaggerated concern that immediately put me on guard. He settled into the living room chair that had been his father's favorite and began a careful interrogation disguised as casual conversation about my daily routines and business decisions. When I mentioned planning to renovate the downtown office complex, he frowned and suggested I might be taking on too much responsibility for someone my age. Jessica joined these weekly visits within a month, bringing homemade cookies and subtle suggestions that I seemed more forgetful than usual. She would ask me to repeat stories I had already told, then exchange meaningful glances with Brandon when I declined to repeat myself. They began arriving together, presenting a united front of loving concern that felt more like an intervention than family bonding time. Their campaign escalated when they introduced Dr. Patricia Wu into our family dynamic. Brandon claimed she was a friend from his gym who specialized in geriatric medicine and had expressed interest in meeting me after hearing about my successful business career. Dr. Wu appeared to be a competent professional in her 40s, with gentle mannerisms and impressive credentials displayed on her smartphone when she showed me her practice website. The doctor's questions during that first meeting seemed routine until she began focusing on my decision-making processes and memory retention. She asked detailed questions about my daily medication routine, whether I ever felt confused about dates or appointments, and if I had experienced any episodes of disorientation. When I answered honestly that I occasionally forgot minor details like everyone my age, she nodded knowingly and took careful notes on her tablet. Dr. Wu suggested that people with significant financial responsibilities often experience stress-related cognitive issues that could be addressed with proper evaluation and treatment. She recommended comprehensive testing to establish baseline cognitive function and identify any areas that might benefit from medical intervention. Her proposal sounded reasonable and caring, which made my growing unease feel unreasonable and paranoid. Brandon and Jessica enthusiastically supported Dr. Wu's recommendations, offering to accompany me to appointments and help manage any treatment regimen she prescribed. Their eagerness to involve themselves in my medical care struck me as unusual given their typical indifference to my well-being, beyond its impact on their financial security. I agreed to consider the evaluation while privately deciding to research Dr. Wu's credentials more thoroughly. My investigation into the doctor's background revealed several troubling inconsistencies. Her medical license had been suspended twice for inappropriate prescribing practices, though both suspensions had been lifted after brief periods. Online reviews of her practice were mixed, with several patients complaining about premature dementia diagnoses and aggressive treatment recommendations for cognitive issues. Most concerning were two malpractice suits filed by families claiming she had misdiagnosed elderly patients to support contested guardianship proceedings. The discovery that something was seriously wrong with my children's sudden interest in my mental health prompted me to install security cameras throughout my house. I chose small wireless devices that could be hidden behind picture frames and inside decorative objects, creating a comprehensive surveillance system that would record all conversations and activities in common areas. The investment of $3,000 felt justified by the growing certainty that I needed evidence of whatever my children were planning. Meanwhile, I began noticing subtle attempts to undermine my confidence in my own mental acuity. Jessica would contradict details about conversations we had shared, insisting I had said things I knew I had never mentioned. Brandon brought up business decisions from years past, questioning my memory of specific transactions and suggesting I might be confusing different deals. Their coordinated efforts to make me doubt my own recollections felt calculated and cruel. The hidden cameras captured their strategy sessions during visits when they thought I was napping or working in my home office. Brandon would review talking points with Jessica, coaching her on how to phrase questions that would elicit responses they could later characterize as confused or inappropriate. They discussed timing their interventions to coincide with moments when I might be tired or distracted, maximizing the likelihood that I would appear mentally diminished. One particularly revealing recording showed Brandon researching conservatorship laws on my computer while I was supposedly resting upstairs. He had printed articles about the legal process for declaring adults incompetent and establishing court-appointed guardianship over their finances. The documents hidden in his jacket pocket indicated he had already consulted with attorneys about the requirements for gaining control over my business empire and personal assets. Jessica's role in their scheme involved creating evidence of my alleged cognitive decline through carefully edited recordings of our conversations. She used a smartphone app that could selectively delete portions of audio files, removing her leading questions while preserving my responses to create the impression that I was providing random or inappropriate answers to normal inquiries. Her collection of these manufactured evidence files was stored in a cloud account she accessed during visits to my house. The most chilling discovery came through a recording of a phone conversation between my children and Dr. Wu, discussing the timeline for their intervention. The doctor explained that establishing a pattern of cognitive decline would require at least 3 months of documented incidents before any court would consider guardianship proceedings. She recommended specific scenarios designed to trigger confusion or disorientation that could be witnessed by multiple parties and documented in medical records. Dr. Wu's plan involved gradually introducing medications that would cause temporary cognitive impairment without creating permanent damage or obvious symptoms that would alert other medical professionals to foul play. She described a combination of prescription drugs that would create confusion memory problems and decision-making difficulties that could be attributed to age-related cognitive decline. The medications would be introduced gradually through samples provided during routine checkups for manufactured health concerns. Brandon and Jessica discussed dividing my assets between them while ensuring I received enough monthly income to cover basic living expenses and medical care. They plan to sell the real estate portfolio and invest the proceeds conservatively, providing them with substantial annual distributions while maintaining the appearance of responsible financial management. Their casual discussion of disposing of my life's work, like unwanted furniture, revealed the depth of their betrayal and the coldness of their calculations. The final piece of their conspiracy emerged during a conversation about eliminating any evidence of their scheme after gaining control of my finances. They planned to dismiss Dr. Wu after she provided the necessary medical documentation, ensuring she could not later reveal their collaboration. Brandon had researched methods for destroying digital evidence, including the recordings Jessica had created and any documents that might connect them to the manufactured medical crisis they were planning to trigger. The weight of my children's betrayal required professional assistance to fully understand its scope and legal implications. I contacted Sarah Johnson, a private investigator recommended by my attorney, who had spent 20 years with the Philadelphia Police Department before starting her own firm specializing in financial crimes and elder abuse cases. Sarah's gray hair and direct manner reminded me of my own practical approach to solving problems, which gave me confidence in her ability to uncover the truth about my children's activities. Sarah's investigation began with surveillance of Brandon and Jessica's daily routines, financial transactions, and personal relationships. Within a week, she had identified several concerning patterns that confirmed my suspicions about their motives for suddenly becoming involved in my life. Brandon's gambling habit had escalated far beyond weekend poker games into a serious addiction that threatened his physical safety and financial survival. The extent of Brandon's gambling debts shocked me despite my growing awareness of his irresponsible behavior. He owed over $200,000 to a syndicate operating out of Atlantic City that employed particularly violent collection methods for delinquent accounts. Sarah's sources indicated that Brandon had received several warnings about payment deadlines, including a visit to his apartment that resulted in damaged property and explicit threats about future consequences for continued non-payment. Vincent Torres, the man leading collection efforts for Brandon's debts, had a reputation for creative solutions to payment problems that often involved liquidating family assets belonging to debtors who could not meet their obligations. Torres specialized in elderly relatives who might be convinced or coerced into providing financial assistance to family members facing dangerous situations. His methods included identifying vulnerable seniors with substantial assets who could be manipulated through family pressure or legal maneuvering. Sarah's investigation revealed that Brandon had already provided Torres with detailed information about my real estate holdings bank accounts and business operations. He had supplied copies of property deeds, financial statements, and insurance policies that Torres was using to evaluate the most efficient methods for converting my assets into cash for debt payment. Their collaboration had been ongoing for several months, with Torres providing advice about legal strategies for gaining access to my wealth. Jessica's financial crisis was less dramatic, but equally desperate. Her lifestyle blog, which promised followers insights into luxury living and fashion trends, had failed to generate sustainable income despite her investment of significant time and borrowed money into professional photography and marketing consultation. The gap between her projected image of wealth and her actual financial resources had created mounting debts that threatened to expose her manufactured persona. The foreclosure proceedings on Jessica's house had begun quietly, with notices sent to an address she no longer monitored regularly due to her chaotic personal life. Her mortgage payment had been delinquent for 4 months, accumulating penalties and fees that pushed the total amount owed beyond her ability to negotiate a settlement. The property had been her primary asset in negotiations with her third husband's divorce attorney, and its loss would leave her with no leverage in settlement discussions. Jessica's divorce from Mark, her personal trainer husband, involved complications that made my financial support crucial for her emotional and legal survival. Mark had discovered that Jessica's apparent wealth was actually my wealth extended to her through generous monthly allowances and payment of her major expenses. His attorney was demanding financial disclosure that would reveal Jessica's dependence on my support and her lack of independent assets or income. The most disturbing discovery was evidence that my children had been researching my business operations and personal assets through Jessica's real estate license, which provided her with access to property databases and financial records. She had obtained copies of deeds, tax assessments, and mortgage information for properties across 3 states, creating a comprehensive inventory of my holdings that could be used to support conservatorship proceedings or debt collection efforts. Sarah's investigation uncovered communication between Jessica and various attorneys specializing in elder law and estate planning. These consultations had focused on the legal process for establishing guardianship over elderly parents who might be experiencing cognitive decline or making poor financial decisions. Jessica had presented herself as a concerned daughter, seeking to protect her mother's assets from potential exploitation or mismanagement. The most shocking revelation came when Sarah discovered that Dr. Wu's involvement in my case was not coincidental, but had been arranged through Vincent Torres, who had used her services in previous situations involving elderly family members of his debtors. Torres had connected Brandon with Dr. Wu after learning about my substantial assets and recognizing an opportunity to recover gambling debts through medical manipulation rather than physical intimidation. Dr. Wu's pattern of practice involved collaborating with family members who needed elderly relatives declared incompetent for financial reasons. She provided medical documentation supporting conservatorship applications in exchange for substantial payments that were disguised as consulting fees or speaking honorariums. Her expertise in geriatric medicine provided credibility for diagnoses that would not be questioned by family court judges who relied on medical testimony to make guardianship decisions. Sarah obtained copies of bank records showing payments from Torres to Dr. Wu for previous cases involving elderly victims whose families had accumulated gambling or drug debts. The amounts involved suggested a well-established business relationship built around exploiting vulnerable seniors who possessed assets that could be liquidated to satisfy their relatives' financial obligations to criminal organizations. The timeline for their planned intervention was accelerating due to pressure from Torres, who had given Brandon a deadline of 60 days to provide substantial payment or face escalating consequences. Brandon and Jessica had scheduled my evaluation with Dr. Wu for the following month, with plans to request emergency guardianship based on her diagnosis of sudden cognitive decline, requiring immediate family intervention to prevent financial exploitation or self-harm. Their strategy involved creating a medical crisis that would provide justification for emergency court proceedings while I was unable to defend myself or contest their medical claims. Dr. Wu had explained that elderly patients experiencing acute medical episodes were often granted temporary guardianship arrangements that could be extended indefinitely if their recovery was incomplete, or if family members demonstrated ongoing concern about their decision-making capacity. The most chilling aspect of their conspiracy was the casual way they discussed manipulating my medical condition to create the appearance of cognitive impairment. Sarah's surveillance equipment captured conversations in which they debated various approaches to triggering a medical emergency that would appear natural, while ensuring I survived in a condition that would support their legal claims about my mental incapacity. Dr. Wu had provided detailed instructions about medications that could cause temporary confusion disorientation and decision-making problems without creating obvious symptoms that would alert emergency medical personnel to intentional poisoning. She described specific combinations of common prescription drugs that would interact to produce cognitive symptoms that could be attributed to age-related conditions or stress-related medical issues. Brandon and Jessica had already obtained the medications Dr. Wu recommended by using prescriptions written for fake symptoms during routine medical appointments. They had accumulated a supply of drugs that could be administered gradually through food or beverages, creating a pattern of increasing cognitive problems that would culminate in a medical crisis requiring hospitalization and providing them with opportunities to present guardianship petitions to family court judges. The realization that my children were planning to poison me to steal my life's work created a level of betrayal that challenged my ability to respond rationally. The depth of their callousness and the premeditated nature of their scheme demanded a response that would not only protect my assets, but would also ensure they faced appropriate consequences for their actions. Sarah assured me that we had sufficient evidence to involve federal authorities, but recommended that we allow their plan to proceed under controlled circumstances that would provide irrefutable proof of their criminal intentions. The evidence of my children's betrayal transformed my approach to the situation from defensive to offensive, as I realized that protecting myself required more than just avoiding their trap. I needed to create consequences that would permanently end their ability to threaten me while ensuring my financial security remained intact, regardless of any legal challenges they might pursue. This transformation from victim to strategist felt both empowering and necessary for my survival. Working with David Park, an attorney specializing in international asset protection, I began the complex process of restructuring my $12 million estate to place it beyond the reach of any domestic legal proceedings. David had built his reputation helping wealthy Americans protect assets from various threats, including litigation, divorce settlements, and family disputes that could compromise financial security. His expertise in offshore financial structures provided multiple layers of protection that would be virtually impossible to penetrate through standard legal procedures. The trust structure we created involved 3 separate jurisdictions with different legal systems and disclosure requirements that would make asset recovery extremely difficult, even for sophisticated adversaries with substantial legal resources. The primary trust was established in the Cayman Islands, with a Nevis limited liability company serving as trustee, while a Cook Islands trust provided additional protection through statutes that did not recognize foreign judgments or court orders related to asset recovery. My role in this structure was carefully designed to provide maximum benefit while minimizing legal vulnerability to challenges from family members or creditors. I remained the beneficiary of all three trusts with broad distribution powers, but I had no legal ownership or control that could be targeted by conservatorship proceedings or civil litigation. The trustees had complete discretion over distributions based on my requests, but they were not legally required to comply with any external demands or court orders. The process of transferring assets to the offshore structure required meticulous documentation and timing to avoid creating evidence that could be characterized as fraudulent conveyance designed to avoid legitimate obligations. Each property transfer and account movement was executed through legitimate business transactions that created proper legal foundations for the asset protection strategy while maintaining compliance with all applicable tax and reporting requirements. David arranged for a corporate restructuring that converted my real estate holdings into shares of foreign corporations owned by the offshore trusts. This transformation changed the legal nature of my assets from directly owned properties to beneficial interests in foreign entities, creating additional barriers to domestic legal proceedings while preserving my economic benefits from the real estate portfolio. The corporations were managed by independent directors who had no connection to me personally, but who were contractually obligated to follow investment guidelines that protected my interests. Simultaneously, I began creating a careful documentation trail that would support my apparent cognitive decline while actually demonstrating my complete mental competence to independent observers. This involved working with Father Michael, my priest, for over 20 years, and Linda Rodriguez, my banker, since I opened my first business account to establish witness testimony about my actual mental state during the period when my children were claiming I was becoming incompetent. The medical records I created with Dr. Elizabeth Harris, my longtime physician, showed routine age-appropriate health concerns, but no evidence of cognitive impairment or decision-making problems. Dr. Harris conducted comprehensive cognitive testing and documented my complete mental competence, creating a medical record that would contradict any claims Dr. Wu might make about sudden cognitive decline. These records were sealed and stored with David's firm to prevent access by my children or their collaborators. My performance around Brandon and Jessica required careful calibration to appear increasingly confused without actually providing them with legitimate evidence of incompetence. I began asking them to repeat information they had already provided, expressing uncertainty about recent events, and occasionally appearing disoriented about dates or appointments. These performances were subtle enough to encourage their belief that their plan was working, while being obviously manufactured to anyone who observed me in other contexts. The hidden camera system in my house provided continuous documentation of their efforts to manipulate my apparent mental state through leading questions, contradictory statements, and deliberate attempts to create confusion about routine matters. Their coaching sessions before our meetings were particularly revealing as they discussed specific strategies for eliciting responses they could later characterize as evidence of cognitive decline. Rosa Santos, my housekeeper for 20 years, became an unwitting ally in documenting my actual mental state during this period. Her daily observations of my routine activities, decision-making processes, and general functioning provided evidence that contradicted my children's claims about my declining capabilities. Rosa's testimony would be particularly valuable because of her long relationship with our family and her lack of financial interest in the outcome of any legal proceedings. The most dangerous aspect of my strategy involved allowing my children to proceed with their poisoning plan while secretly protecting myself from the effects of their chosen medications. Dr. Harris provided me with information about the drugs Dr. Wu had recommended and supplied antidotes that would neutralize their effects if administered within specific time frames. This approach required precise timing and careful monitoring to ensure my safety while allowing sufficient exposure to create evidence of their criminal behavior. I began wearing a small recording device during all interactions with my children, creating an audio record of their attempts to manipulate my responses and document my apparent confusion. These recordings captured not only my performances of cognitive decline, but also their coaching and encouragement designed to elicit increasingly inappropriate responses that could be used to support medical diagnoses of incompetence. The financial aspects of my transformation included gradually reducing my visible assets and apparent income to create the impression that my business empire was less valuable than my children believed. This involved transferring active properties to the offshore corporations while maintaining ownership of older, less valuable holdings that would provide them with some inheritance if they ultimately succeeded in their conservatorship efforts. The strategy ensured they would not be completely disinherited while protecting the substantial majority of my wealth from their schemes. Sarah Johnson maintained surveillance of my children's activities and communications with Torres and Dr. Wu, providing me with advance warning of their plans and timeline. This intelligence allowed me to prepare for their interventions, while ensuring that my responses would appear natural rather than rehearsed or defensive. The coordination between my various allies created a comprehensive strategy that addressed legal, medical, and personal security concerns while building evidence of my children's criminal conspiracy. The emotional toll of pretending to trust my children while knowing they plan to poison me required significant psychological preparation and support. Father Michael provided counseling that helped me maintain perspective about the difference between loving my children and protecting myself from their harmful actions. His guidance emphasized that setting boundaries against abuse was not only appropriate, but necessary for my spiritual and physical well-being. As the date for their planned intervention approached, I felt simultaneously prepared and anxious about the performance I would need to deliver to ensure their complete exposure while protecting my own safety. The success of my strategy depended on allowing them sufficient opportunity to commit serious crimes while preventing them from causing permanent harm to my health or financial security. The balance required careful timing and precise execution of each element of my defensive plan. The family dinner where my children planned to poison me took place on a Thursday evening in April, exactly 3 months after the newspaper article that had triggered their sudden interest in my well-being. I had prepared meticulously for this evening, ensuring that Dr. Harris was on call at the hospital, that my recording equipment was fully charged and positioned optimally, and that the antidote medications were easily accessible in my purse. The dinner would either expose their conspiracy completely or put my life at serious risk if my preparations proved inadequate. Brandon arrived first carrying a bottle of my favorite wine and an elaborate bouquet of spring flowers that seemed designed to create the appearance of a loving son treating his mother to a special evening. His nervous energy was obvious to me, but might have appeared to be excitement about our family gathering to any casual observer. He spent considerable time arranging the flowers in my dining room, while Jessica prepared the salad in my kitchen, giving them both opportunities to add their chosen medications to my food and beverages. Jessica's contribution to dinner was homemade lasagna that required significant preparation time, during which she had multiple opportunities to introduce the drugs Dr. Wu had prescribed for creating cognitive confusion and cardiac stress. She also prepared garlic bread and a fruit salad, providing multiple delivery methods for whatever combination of medications they had decided would be most effective for their purposes. Her cheerful commentary about wanting to cook more often for family gatherings felt particularly cruel given her actual intentions. The medications they chose created effects that began subtly during dinner, but escalated rapidly afterward, confirming Dr. Wu's expertise in creating medical emergencies that would appear to be natural health crises rather than intentional poisoning. I began experiencing mild confusion about 20 minutes after we began eating, followed by increased heart rate and slight disorientation that would have been alarming if I had not been prepared with appropriate countermeasures. My performance during the escalating medical crisis required careful balance between appearing genuinely distressed and maintaining sufficient control to activate my emergency protocols when necessary. I allowed myself to seem increasingly confused and physically uncomfortable while secretly recording their responses to my condition. Brandon and Jessica expressed appropriate concern while exchanging glances that revealed their satisfaction with the effectiveness of their plan. When I collapsed in the living room approximately 2 hours after dinner began, they immediately called 911 and began performing what appeared to be competent first aid while actually ensuring that I remained conscious enough to require hospitalization, but not so alert that I could communicate effectively with emergency responders. Their coaching of each other about what to tell paramedics was captured clearly on my hidden recording equipment. The ambulance ride to the hospital provided them with additional opportunities to establish their narrative about my recent cognitive decline and their growing concerns about my ability to manage my personal and financial affairs safely. Brandon rode with me while Jessica followed in her car, allowing them to coordinate their stories about my medical history and recent behavior patterns before speaking with hospital staff. Their detailed preparation was evident in the consistency of their accounts to different medical personnel. Dr. Elizabeth Harris was waiting in the emergency department when we arrived, having been alerted by my earlier call about the planned medical intervention. She conducted the initial examination while my children provided their carefully rehearsed history of my declining mental state and recent episodes of confusion and disorientation. Dr. Harris played her role perfectly, expressing appropriate concern while conducting tests that would reveal the presence of the medications my children had administered. The decision to admit me to the intensive care unit was made based on my cardiac symptoms and the need for continuous monitoring while the drugs worked through my system. This placement in ICU would provide my children with the privacy they needed to present their legal documents without interference from hospital staff or other family members who might question their sudden authority over my medical and financial decisions. My room in the ICU was equipped with monitoring equipment that would document my vital signs throughout the period when the poisoning drugs were affecting my system, providing medical evidence of the assault my children had committed. The nursing staff was professional and attentive, but they had no reason to suspect that my medical crisis was anything other than a natural health emergency requiring standard treatment protocols. The first 24 hours in intensive care were crucial for allowing the medications to work through my system while maintaining the appearance of unconsciousness or severe disorientation that would support my children's claims about my mental state. Dr. Harris carefully monitored my actual condition while ensuring that my apparent symptoms supported the need for continued hospitalization and medical observation. Brandon and Jessica maintained a constant presence in the ICU waiting area, accepting sympathy from other families while expressing their devotion to their mother and their determination to ensure I received the best possible care. Their performance of grief and concern was convincing enough that hospital staff commented favorably about their dedication and love for their mother. Several nurses mentioned how fortunate I was to have children who cared so deeply about my well-being. On the second day, they began discussing their need to review my financial affairs to ensure that my bills were being paid and my business obligations were being met during my hospitalization. This conversation with Dr. Harris was designed to establish their responsible concern for my practical needs, while introducing the idea that they might need legal authority to act on my behalf if my recovery was delayed or incomplete. The third day brought the culmination of their plan as they arrived with Vincent Torres disguised as a notary public and carrying an official-looking briefcase filled with legal documents they claimed were necessary for managing my affairs during my medical crisis. Torres wore an ill-fitting business suit and carried identification that would pass casual inspection, but had been created specifically for this fraudulent representation of his professional credentials. Their conversation outside my room was captured clearly by the recording equipment I had activated using the emergency button that appeared to be a request for nursing assistance. Brandon and Jessica discussed their timeline for obtaining my signature on documents that would transfer significant assets directly to Torres in satisfaction of Brandon's gambling debts, with the remainder being divided between them according to a predetermined formula that maximized their immediate access to cash. The legal documents they prepared for my signature included power of attorney agreements that would grant them complete authority over my business operations property transfers that would convey ownership of specific real estate holdings to Torres or his designated entities, and financial account access forms that would allow them to liquidate investments and bank deposits. The comprehensiveness of their preparation revealed months of detailed planning and legal consultation. Torres provided coaching about the specific language they should use when presenting the documents to me, emphasizing the importance of recording my verbal consent to the transactions in addition to obtaining my written signature. His experience with similar fraudulent schemes was evident in his detailed instructions about creating evidence that would support the legitimacy of the transactions if they were later challenged in court. The moment when they entered my room with their briefcase full of fraudulent documents marked the culmination of months of planning and the beginning of their complete exposure as criminals who had attempted to murder their mother for financial gain. Their confidence in their plan's success was obvious as they arranged papers on my bedside table, while discussing which properties they would sell first and how quickly they could access cash from my various accounts. Jessica leaned over my supposedly unconscious body and whispered instructions about signing my name in specific locations, while Brandon held my hand to guide the pen across signature lines. Their casual discussion about dividing my assets revealed the depth of their betrayal and their complete lack of concern for my well-being beyond its utility for their financial benefit. Torres grew increasingly nervous as the signing process continued, apparently uncomfortable with the obvious fraud being committed in a hospital setting where discovery would have serious legal consequences. His suggestions that they complete the process more quickly revealed his experience with law enforcement investigation methods and his awareness that they were creating substantial evidence of their criminal conspiracy. The recording equipment captured not only their detailed discussions about asset division and debt payment, but also their casual comments about my future living arrangements and medical care after they gained control of my finances. Their plans involved placing me in a minimal-cost assisted living facility while they liquidated my real estate portfolio and invested the proceeds to provide them with annual income that would far exceed my care costs. As they prepared to forge my signature on the final documents, I made my decision to end their charade and expose their conspiracy completely. The moment had arrived for my transformation from victim to prosecutor, and I was ready to deliver the justice their crimes deserved. The moment I opened my eyes fully and sat up in the hospital bed marked the end of my children's conspiracy and the beginning of their complete downfall. Brandon dropped the pen he had been using to guide my supposedly unconscious hand, while Jessica stumbled backward, knocking over the chair she had positioned beside my bed. Torres grabbed the briefcase containing their fraudulent documents and moved toward the door, but I had already activated the security alert that would bring hospital staff and law enforcement to my room within minutes. My voice was clear and strong as I addressed the three criminals who had believed they were stealing my life's work from a helpless old woman. I informed them that I had been fully conscious throughout their visit and had recorded every word of their plan to forge my signature on documents designed to transfer my assets to satisfy Brandon's gambling debts. The shocked expressions on their faces revealed their complete inability to comprehend that their victim had outmaneuvered them so thoroughly. The smartphone I produced from beneath my hospital gown displayed the live stream that had been broadcasting their entire conversation to David Park's law office, where FBI agent Robert Stone had been monitoring their activities in real time. Agent Stone had obtained warrants for their arrest based on evidence of elder abuse fraud and conspiracy that Sarah Johnson had compiled over the previous months. The federal charges would ensure that their crimes carried serious penalties that reflected the severity of their premeditated assault on my person and property. Brandon's attempts to explain their actions as loving concern for my welfare sounded pathetic even to him, as he struggled to rationalize their presence in my hospital room with a fake notary and forged legal documents. His claims that they were only trying to help manage my affairs during my medical crisis collapsed when I revealed my knowledge of his gambling debts and his collaboration with Torres to liquidate my assets for debt payment. Jessica's emotional breakdown was immediate and dramatic as she realized that her comfortable lifestyle would disappear permanently when she was convicted of felony elder abuse and conspiracy charges. Her tears and pleas for forgiveness might have been moving if they had not followed months of calculated planning to poison me and steal my property. Her concerns about her children's future welfare had not prevented her from attempting to murder their grandmother for financial gain. Torres made a desperate attempt to escape the hospital before law enforcement arrived, abandoning his briefcase of fraudulent documents and fake notary materials in his haste to distance himself from the scene of the crime. His flight ended at the hospital's main entrance, where Detective Carol Lynn was waiting with uniformed officers who had surrounded the building according to Agent Stone's instructions. Torres's capture provided federal investigators with access to his phone and records that documented his involvement in similar schemes targeting elderly victims. Dr. Patricia Wu was arrested simultaneously at her medical office, where FBI agents discovered extensive evidence of her collaboration with criminal organizations to provide fraudulent medical documentation supporting conservatorship proceedings. Her patient records revealed a pattern of misdiagnosing elderly individuals whose families needed legal justification for gaining control over significant assets. The medical board would revoke her license permanently in addition to the federal charges she would face for conspiracy and fraud. The legal documents my children had prepared for my signature provided prosecutors with detailed evidence of their criminal intent and the sophisticated planning that had preceded their assault. The power of attorney agreements included provisions that would have granted them authority to sell properties immediately without court supervision, transfer funds to offshore accounts controlled by Torres, and commit me to long-term care facilities, regardless of my medical condition or personal preferences. Agent Stone's investigation revealed that Torres operated a comprehensive elder abuse scheme that targeted families in financial distress by helping them exploit elderly relatives through medical manipulation and fraudulent legal proceedings. His network included corrupt medical professionals, attorneys willing to prepare false documents, and investigators who could identify suitable victims through public records and financial databases. Brandon and Jessica had been recruited into this criminal organization through Torres's assessment of my wealth and their desperate need for immediate access to substantial amounts of cash. The scope of evidence against my children included audio recordings of their planning sessions, video surveillance of their attempts to manipulate my mental state medical records, documenting their poisoning efforts and financial records, showing their collaboration with Torres to evaluate and divide my assets. Federal prosecutors indicated that the strength of this evidence made plea negotiations unlikely and virtually guaranteed substantial prison sentences for all participants in the conspiracy. Dr. Elizabeth Harris provided crucial testimony about the medications found in my system and their potential effects if I had not received appropriate medical countermeasures. Her analysis confirmed that the drugs administered by my children could have caused permanent cognitive damage or death if I had not been prepared for their assault. This medical evidence elevated the charges against them to include attempted murder, in addition to the financial crimes they had planned. The hospital's cooperation with the federal investigation included providing security footage that documented Torres's presence in the ICU and my children's suspicious behavior throughout my admission. The nursing staff testified about Brandon and Jessica's inappropriate questions about my mental state and their obvious disappointment when my condition appeared to improve rather than deteriorate as they had expected. Sarah Johnson's surveillance evidence provided prosecutors with comprehensive documentation of the conspiracy's development, from initial planning through execution. Her recordings of conversations between Torres and my children revealed the calculated nature of their crimes and their complete lack of remorse for the harm they planned to inflict on me. This evidence would be particularly effective with juries, who would be appalled by the betrayal of family trust and the vulnerability of elderly victims. The financial investigation revealed that Torres had already identified buyers for several of my properties and had arranged offshore accounts where the sale proceeds would be transferred beyond the reach of American law enforcement. His preparation for laundering the stolen assets demonstrated the sophisticated nature of his criminal organization and the international scope of his illegal operations. Federal authorities began coordinating with international partners to dismantle his entire network. My children's requests for bail were denied based on the severity of their crimes and the federal government's assessment that they posed a continued threat to my safety and financial security. Their detention pending trial ensured that they could not attempt additional schemes to gain access to my assets or intimidate witnesses who would testify against them. The federal courthouse holding facility would be their home until their trials concluded with what prosecutors predicted would be lengthy prison sentences. The speed and thoroughness of their downfall reflected months of careful preparation by law enforcement agencies that had been investigating Torres's criminal organization for several years. My case provided the evidence they needed to obtain convictions not only against my children and their immediate collaborators, but against the entire network of criminals who preyed on elderly Americans through medical manipulation and fraudulent legal proceedings. As I watched my children led away in handcuffs, I felt a mixture of sadness for the people they had chosen to become and satisfaction that their crimes would carry appropriate consequences. Their transformation from the babies I had worked so hard to provide for into adults who would poison their mother for gambling, money represented a betrayal that required justice rather than forgiveness. The legal system would ensure that other families would be protected from their criminal behavior. 6 months after watching Brandon and Jessica led away in handcuffs, I stood in the federal courthouse listening to Judge William Carter sentence my son to 8 years in prison for elder abuse conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted murder. Brandon's gambling creditors had already garnished his remaining assets, leaving him with nothing but legal debt and a criminal record that would follow him for the remainder of his life. His transformation from my child into a convicted felon represented the ultimate consequence of choosing easy money over honest work and family loyalty. Jessica received a slightly shorter sentence of 6 years due to her cooperation with federal investigators who were prosecuting the broader criminal network that had targeted elderly victims across multiple states. Her cooperation did not reflect genuine remorse, but rather a calculated attempt to minimize her punishment for crimes she continued to blame on financial desperation rather than moral failure. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and her bankruptcy filing eliminated any possibility of rebuilding the lifestyle she had valued more than her relationship with her mother. Dr. Patricia Wu faced the most severe consequences of all the conspirators, receiving 12 years in federal prison for her leadership role in multiple elder abuse schemes that had victimized dozens of families over several years. The medical board's investigation revealed that she had falsified diagnoses and manipulated medical records to support fraudulent conservatorship proceedings in cases spanning 3 states. Her victims included elderly patients whose families had collaborated with criminal organizations to steal assets worth millions of dollars through medical deception and legal manipulation. Vincent Torres received a 15-year sentence as the leader of a criminal organization that federal prosecutors described as one of the most sophisticated elder abuse networks ever uncovered in the United States. His conviction opened investigations into similar schemes operating in 12 other states, leading to additional arrests and prosecutions that would protect countless elderly Americans from exploitation by their own family members. The assets he had accumulated through years of criminal activity were forfeited to provide restitution for his victims. The civil lawsuits that followed the criminal convictions provided additional consequences for the medical professionals and attorneys who had enabled the conspiracy against me and other victims. Several law firms faced malpractice claims and professional sanctions for their roles in preparing fraudulent documents and providing legal advice that facilitated elder abuse. The financial penalties imposed through these civil proceedings created powerful deterrents for other professionals who might consider similar collaboration with criminal organizations. My decision to establish the Margaret Foundation for Elder Protection transformed my personal experience of betrayal into a resource for preventing similar crimes against other vulnerable seniors. The foundation provided legal assistance for elderly victims of family exploitation, funded training programs for medical professionals to recognize signs of elder abuse, and supported legislation strengthening penalties for crimes targeting seniors. The $12 million I had protected from my children's scheme became seed money for initiatives that would protect thousands of elderly Americans from exploitation. The Foundation's first major initiative involved creating a network of elder abuse investigators who could respond rapidly to reports of suspicious activity involving elderly victims and their family members. These investigators trained in financial crimes and geriatric medicine provided law enforcement agencies with expertise needed to recognize and prosecute complex schemes that traditional police departments were not equipped to handle effectively. The program's success led to federal funding that allowed expansion into additional states. Working with Rosa Santos and her extended family provided me with the genuine family relationships that my biological children had never offered. Rosa's granddaughter Maria graduated from law school with assistance from my foundation and joined our legal team as an attorney specializing in elder protection cases. Her passion for justice and her understanding of family loyalty represented everything I had hoped to instill in my own children, but had failed to achieve through material generosity rather than moral guidance. The travel opportunities that my protected wealth provided allowed me to explore interests and experiences that I had postponed during decades of building business success and supporting ungrateful children. My trips to Europe and Asia included visits to elder care facilities and legal systems that offered innovative approaches to protecting vulnerable seniors from exploitation. These experiences informed the Foundation's development of best practices that could be implemented in American communities. Father Michael's guidance throughout my recovery from the emotional trauma of my children's betrayal emphasized the importance of forgiveness without enabling continued harmful behavior. His counseling helped me understand that protecting myself from their criminal actions was consistent with loving them as human beings, while refusing to subsidize their destructive choices. The Foundation's victim support programs included counseling resources that helped other elderly victims process similar feelings of betrayal and loss. The offshore asset protection structure that David Park had created to protect my wealth from my children's conspiracy remained in place as a permanent shield against future legal challenges or family exploitation. The trusts provided steady income for my personal needs and foundation operations, while ensuring that the principal remained secure regardless of changing circumstances or emerging threats. This financial security allowed me to focus on meaningful activities rather than worrying about protecting my assets from continued family exploitation. Dr. Elizabeth Harris became a key advisor for the Foundation's medical education programs, helping develop training materials that taught healthcare providers to recognize signs of elder abuse and respond appropriately to suspected cases of family exploitation. Her expertise in geriatric medicine and her experience with my case provided credibility for our educational initiatives and helped build support among medical professionals for stronger elder protection measures. The media attention surrounding my case and the Foundation's launch brought invitations to speak at conferences and congressional hearings about elder abuse prevention and prosecution. These speaking opportunities allowed me to transform my personal experience into advocacy for policy changes that would strengthen legal protections for elderly Americans and create additional resources for investigating and prosecuting crimes targeting seniors. Sarah Johnson joined the Foundation as Director of Investigations using her law enforcement experience to train other investigators and coordinate with federal agencies working to combat elder abuse networks. Her expertise in financial crimes and surveillance techniques provided the Foundation with capabilities that made our intervention programs particularly effective in complex cases involving sophisticated criminal schemes. The relationships I developed with other elder abuse survivors through the Foundation's support programs created a community of resilience and mutual assistance that replaced the toxic family dynamics I had endured for decades. These friendships were based on shared experiences of overcoming betrayal and building meaningful lives after protecting themselves from exploitation by people they had loved and trusted. My daily routine now includes meaningful activities that contribute to important causes rather than enabling destructive behavior by ungrateful family members. The Foundation's work provides purpose and satisfaction that I never experienced during years of subsidizing my children's poor choices and irresponsible behavior. Each elderly victim we help protect represents a family that will avoid the pain and betrayal I experienced from my own children. The legal reforms that emerged from federal investigations triggered by my case included stronger penalties for elder abuse crimes and improved training requirements for professionals who work with elderly clients. These changes represented systematic improvements that would protect future generations of seniors from exploitation by family members and criminal organizations that prey on vulnerable elderly Americans. As I reflect on the transformation from victim to advocate that my children's betrayal ultimately enabled, I recognize that their crimes created opportunities for meaningful contribution to society that would not have existed if they had remained grateful and responsible adults. The Foundation's success in protecting other elderly victims provides satisfaction that far exceeds any joy I might have derived from continuing to enable their destructive behavior through misguided generosity. The life lesson that emerged from this experience centers on the crucial importance of recognizing that love without boundaries becomes enablement that ultimately harms both the giver and the receiver. Self-worth cannot be built through sacrificing personal well-being to subsidize other people's poor choices, even when those people are family members who demand unconditional support, regardless of their behavior. True love sometimes requires refusing to participate in destructive patterns that prevent growth and accountability. Today, I live surrounded by people who value my friendship and respect my boundaries, rather than viewing me primarily as a source of financial support for their lifestyle choices. The Foundation's work continues to grow and protect vulnerable seniors while providing me with purpose that reflects my values rather than my willingness to enable harmful behavior. My wealth serves meaningful causes that create positive change rather than subsidizing destructive choices by people who took my generosity for granted. The peace I have found through building genuine relationships and contributing to important causes represents the happiness that eluded me during decades of trying to purchase my children's love through financial generosity. True satisfaction comes from activities that align with personal values and contribute to the well-being of others who share similar commitments to integrity and mutual respect. Have you ever found yourself wondering whether your generosity toward family members might be enabling harmful behavior rather than expressing genuine love? The distinction between supporting people we care about and subsidizing their destructive choices can be difficult to recognize, especially when family members present their needs as emergencies that require immediate assistance. Share your thoughts in the comments below about how you've learned to set healthy boundaries with family members who might take advantage of your kindness. If this story resonated with your own experiences or concerns about protecting elderly family members from exploitation, please like this video to help others find resources for elder protection and abuse prevention. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about overcoming family betrayal and building meaningful lives through resilience and self-advocacy. Share this video with friends and family members who might benefit from understanding the warning signs of elder abuse and the importance of protecting vulnerable seniors from exploitation. Thank you for joining me in this journey from betrayal to empowerment, and I hope my experience provides encouragement for anyone facing similar challenges with family members who prioritize their financial needs over relationships built on genuine love and respect. Remember that protecting yourself from exploitation is not selfish but necessary for maintaining the resources and energy needed to contribute positively to the lives of people who truly value your well-being.